Have I worn this hat before in a video? I don't think so. Anyways, hey guys, welcome back to another video. My name is Ryan Styles Harris, and in this video today, I wanted to show you what I've been working on with my two-wheel drive buggy over the past couple months. Recently, you saw I went up to the Masters of Dirt at Beach RC, and it was kind of like a preparation for the INS, the Indoor National Series from J Concepts, coming up here for me in actually this next coming week. I've been working really hard on my cars to get them up to speed 100%, figure out some problems and setup issues, and I thought that I would just kind of share what I've discovered along the way. So let's go ahead and jump into it. Oh, but before we do, I got a couple cool things in the mail and I wanted to see what they are / show you. So let's take a look. Wait, let me see if I can get this noise on camera. It's so satisfying. So this first package is from MIP. Something I ordered over Black Friday. Oh, for those of you out there that use the MIP tools, they're really awesome. I'm not sponsored by them. This is not a paid endorsement at all. I just really like their tools. And they came out with the ball end 2mm wrench and like drill bit piece. If you know what I'm talking about, especially on some of the cars where you're trying to take off like the shock screw on the bottom of the A-arm, on the rear A-arms specifically, sometimes it's like a weird wonky angle, or just a few of the other screws on the car, and the straight hex, you know that you're destroying it or the screw when you just try and cheat it and jam it in there. Really looking forward to using this ball end wrench. Very cool. This next one's a little bigger, from Shell. Kurt, what's up? Thank you. This one I think is going to be really cool. He did something with one of the parts before he sent it. He sent me a picture. The shell towers for the B64. I've been running them on my B64 almost since I got the car. Really like them, super consistent. The holes and the geometry are slightly different than the factory towers. So if you haven't tried them and you just happen to break one, you got to replace it, give the shell tower a try. It's really cool, really awesome. I think that a few of the AE factory guys run them. I know Dustin Evans has run them in the past and a few others, so good stuff. Give them a try. This next piece is cool for two reasons. One, I haven't tried the Nova slipper kit yet. It's gonna be lighter than the factory assembly based on how it goes together. I don't know much about it yet. I haven't tried it. That's why I got one. Kurt, he encouraged me to give it a shot. And then he put a custom little tag. Let's see if you can see this on the camera. Put my own custom nickname right there on the item description. Pretty cool. So if you guys are looking for any of these pieces, I'll go ahead and link them down in the first few links down in the video description below. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into this two-wheel drive buggy stuff and see what we found out. As most of us know, two-wheel drive buggies is kind of like a very love or hate relationship. When they work, they're really fun. When the setup is way off and it's not working, it's really hard to enjoy them. We've all been there. I've been there plenty of times, but I've been working on my two-wheel a lot recently, and I think that it's working pretty good. So I wanted to share with you guys what I've been working through and how it's gotten me to the point that it's at now. I recently went through my two-wheel drive buggy and I completely tore it down and went through and made sure that everything was as good as it possibly could be. Looking for bad bearings, bent hinge pins, bent shock shafts, bent ball studs, everything that could possibly be wrong with it. I wanted to make sure that it was all taken care of out of the car. The first thing that I did was I stripped it all down and then I polished up stuff like the hinge pins. Before I took them completely apart, I would check to make sure if there was anything wrong with them, if they were bent, if anything was binding, so that way I could inspect it further and replace everything that needed to be. Everything looked pretty good, didn't find any bent hinge pins or bent shock shafts, so I went ahead and polished them up and I put them back together. Now, one thing that I was checking as I was putting the car back together was something in the front end over the past month or so has just not felt right. I knew this and confirmed my suspicions when I was at a local track and I was practicing with a couple of my friends. And I drove his B6.1 And I immediately was like, whoa, where are you getting all of this steering out of your car? I can't seem to get this much steering in it no matter what I do. I pulled his car off the track and we looked at it and compared it to mine, and it was exactly the same. What? Springs were the same, oil was the same, pistons were the same, locations, everything was the same. And the rear of the car was virtually identical. But there was a massive difference when it came to his steering versus mine. I looked a little bit further, saw if he was running some extra weight in the front, or if he was running anything, random or bizarre that was kind of hiding underneath it. Nothing was suspect. Everything looked virtually identical. Felt the diffs, the tightness of them felt identical. I just couldn't figure it out. So I was really determined in this rebuild to figure out what was going on. After I checked and saw that there was no bent or broken parts, I kind of started to suspect that something was going on with my steering servo. Even though it was still fairly new, it only had a season or two on it and it wasn't doing anything bizarre. It never had any glitching or weird issues. I looked into it as much as I could and eyeballed everything because something was wrong. You know that little instruction manual that tells you how to put things together and space things according to different brands and just kind of how things are supposed to be according to how it was designed from the manufacturer, and they packaged all that information so nicely for us to read with our own eyes and pay attention to, and I didn't. So I noticed when I was putting my car together and I finally compared one little aspect of his compared to mine, the angle of his steering link was much straighter or less dramatic of an angle compared to mine. My steering servo was spaced too far forward. And what this was doing was it was creating this bizarre effect that when my how do I demonstrate this for the camera? If this is the angle that the steering link should be, but it was like this, and this is your servo arm, what it was doing when it would pull is it would kind of like have to straighten out a little bit before it would start to move. Rather, if it was straight, it would immediately start pulling the wheels. This is the best that I can understand it. So when I straightened that steering link out and I spaced everything according to the manual, went back to the track and ta-da! No other setup changes were made. I suddenly had all the steering that I wished my car had, like his was. It's funny, the things that you can find out if you pay attention to things like manuals and instructions. Anyways, so I'm super glad that I figured that out and I got my car to steer how I wanted it to. Now, as far as the rest of the setup goes, there isn't anything too special going on. I played around with a all-white V1 spring combo front and rear compared to what is now on the car, which is a green V1 and a gray V1 up front. The difference between those two spring setups was the white combo all the way around was a little bit more aggressive. The car would dive a little bit more because the spring up front was softer, and the rear end wouldn't kind of settle in as much because it was stiffer than the green. So what I ended up feeling is that in certain tracks, the car would just kind of unload too much and the front end would just get buried, and then the rear end would lift and the car would just kind of become unstable mid-corner. And I really didn't like that. So when I went to the gray V1 front and the green rear, the car was way more neutral from, just the front to rear balance, and I could drive it way harder into the corners and it wouldn't get as upset, which in stock racing, it's all about momentum, and being able to drive hard into a corner and carrying that momentum was great. And it was ultimately, I think, a better choice for this particular setup. Internals on the shocks are nothing special. 1.6 machine pistons up front, 1.7 machine pistons in the rear, and then depending on the temperature, I either run 32.5 up front with 30 in the rear when it's a little warmer outside, or I run 30 up front and 27.5 in the rear if it's a little cooler. So like for example, this coming weekend at INS, The temperature is going to be a little bit on the cooler side. I think it's going to be somewhere in the 50s. So definitely going to lighten up that fluid so that it can move how I like it to. Really what you're looking for is a car that if you jump in the flat, whether on purpose or by accident, that it doesn't slap and then immediately bounce. You want it to be able to absorb some of that landing and settle down so that you can drive forward and not worry about collecting the car and then driving forward. Hopefully that makes sense. Not doing anything weird as far as the suspension location. It's pretty standard. On most of the setups you'll see in the front, it's outside hole on the top and outside hole on the bottom. Keeps the front end pretty neutral and predictable. It doesn't do anything too weird. In the rear, I've seen some people do laying the shock all the way in on the top and then going one out from the bottom. And then I also see it where it's in the middle at the top and then one out from the bottom. And that's where mine is currently. I think that on those super high bite tracks where you're carrying a lot of corner speed and you're trying to prevent the car from traction rolling, that shock location with it laid all the way in at the top might work out pretty well. But on the tracks where you need a little bit more grip and the suspension to be a little bit more active, I would keep it in the middle at the top and then one out on the bottom. Ball stud spacing, I think I've had this configuration pretty much almost any track that I go to. 3 mil on the outside, 2 mil on the inside. Has a pretty good balance of roll and grip and stability. If you wanted to try something else, you're more than welcome to. Sometimes that seems to be a thing of personal preference. Pill spacing on the car, I tend to play with toe if there's a little to no grip in the track. That gives me a little bit of off-power grip, but it tends to sacrifice a little bit of grip on corner exit. So then I would compensate with the kick-up angle and I would go up with those D-block inserts to something like a 0.5 up to flatten the arm out and get it to be a little bit more responsive to give you that immediate grip. If there's a lot of grip in the track, I tend to keep it either middle or down. And that tends to help the car land a little bit nicer and it gives me that on power drive, if you will, and the rear end kind of doesn't get too squatty, if that makes sense. A lot of that stuff is personal preference, but play around with it, see how it affects the car so that you kind of know what you like the car to do in those different conditions. If you've never done it before, go out on a day that they're not racing at your local track and literally run one pack with the inserts in the C and D blocks one way, change them to something completely different, and see what happens. Once you start to do stuff like that, then you really understand how to set up a car for your personal taste, because everybody drives their cars just a little bit different. Now, something else that you might play with that you may or may not have thought about when it comes to grip is gearing. One thing that we really like to do with our Monster Max motors is we gear them on a little bit on the lower side to kind of get that extra punch out of the corners. But sometimes it can kind of bite us if the grip level isn't high enough yet, and it will tend to break the tires loose too much. So you can kind of compensate with that lack of grip by going up in gearing on the pinion to say, so right now I think in the car I have a 26 tooth pinion and a 72 tooth spur for my particular track that I was just running at, and I'll go up to like a 28 tooth pinion and a 72 tooth spur because it will kind of calm down that initial drive out of the corner because it's got a little bit more gearing it has to work through before that tire breaks loose. I don't always do that, but sometimes it is the ticket. Just depends on the track and what I'm looking for, the particular jumps, so on and so on. But just a little tip, thought you guys might like it, try it out sometime. Now, the one thing that I will play with from time to time is how tight my diff feels. On most tracks, you want a little bit more corner speed, so you keep the diff at a fairly normal tightness. But when those grip levels come up, I tend to really want to tighten that diff down so that I can really get that rip and drive out of the corner as fast as possible. Because what I've seen is, depending on how soft the rear end of my car is, if it's too soft, I can see the car unload on one side and it diffs out. what that does is the car kind of binds up for just a split second and then it drives out of the corner. Whereas what I want the car to do is I just want it to come out of the corner, and as soon as I grab onto the throttle, it just goes, drives out of the corner. It doesn't get that tire on the inside, spins out, and then this tire stops because it's loaded up and it binds up. So when you tighten that diff down, I know what you're thinking, Ryan, didn't you blow up your diff at Masters of Dirt? Yes, I did. There's a very fine balance between it being too tight that it explodes and not tight enough that you don't get this result that I'm talking about. Again, go out on a practice day at your local track, tighten that thing down, see what happens, loosen it up, see what happens. Once you feel it for yourself, you'll know what I'm talking about. So I think that's it for this video. Went through all the setup stuff that I can think of, all the stuff that I know I played around with. Really helps me feel more confident with my car going into my next big race. So I hope that you guys will do the same. If you've never really played around with springs or oil or any of the stuff that I talked about, go to the track on a practice day, mess with it. Don't even worry about getting it right or wrong. Just the more you know how it affects the car will make you a more competent racer, so that when conditions change or you go to a track that's different from your own, you'll know how to get more grip in the car, or get more steering, or get it to land better over there, or jump better here. All that stuff will carry over into other vehicles as you go on in your RC racing career. So get out there, get some wheel time, wrench on that stuff, mess it up, and then fix it later and just have fun. So that's going to be it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked any of those tools that I mentioned in the earlier portions of the video, I linked them down below, and there's a bunch of other stuff that I use down there as well. Thanks for watching. Wish me luck at IMS if you're watching this before. Hopefully it went well. Anyways, I'll see you in the next one.